and welcome back to another episode of I'm Blown. Of all the durables bought in our country on loans, on some kind of financing, more than half are for smartphones. Now, that was a crazy stat that I read while I was reading this publication called The Ken, and I read a very interesting article about how that is affecting human behavior, how human behavior is affecting smartphone sales in India. So we decided to talk about that, and let's talk about it. Okay, so interesting. That's quite an amazing stat. That means if the number of loans in this country, or the quantum of loans in this country, is about 100
for consumer durables, yes.
Durables, you're saying almost 50%.
More than 50%.
More than 50%. So it goes to people taking a loan to buy a smartphone.
And what's also interesting, Sid, is that 1/3 of all are actually on loan. So the number overall in India is growing, and this number has grown even larger. And the reason I found it really an I'm blown moment was because, we've the nature of our growing up is when India has kind of liberalized and grown as an economy and, all of that. And we've seen people take loans, and in our youth or even in our childhood, our parents hardly ever took loans to buy consumer durables. If you had the money, you brought a TV.
Correct.
If you had the money, the only thing I think the first big thing we bought on loan was cars. Cars was something that you kind of bought over a 5-year or a 3-year period. And this has completely changed for all durables, as we know. And it'll be interesting to see how this trend has changed and why smartphones have become such a massive part of taking loans.
So one easy answer is a smartphone is more expensive than a pre-insured TV nowadays.
That's true.
It's true. And I buy more smartphones in my lifetime than I'll buy a fridge. So
and that is true.
That's probably true.
It's the recurring nature of purchase that makes it that as well. That is one reason for
People
sure.
are changing phones like they're changing, T-shirts.
And in that changing phones is another reason, which is that you're often changing phones because you're showing to the world that you're kind of growing as a person in terms of affluence. And as a result, you're buying more. And as a result, you want to show. And thus, very often, you're buying it.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here.
There's a lot to unpack there.
So yes, a smartphone nowadays is not as cheap as it used to be. A phone is not as cheap as it used to be. It's also probably, while it's an aspirational tool, it's also a tool of great utility. Right from voice calls to reaching out to people, to now people using smartphones to do meetings, to households who work from home, or to children who don't go to school anymore, accessing education through smartphones. So it's one of great utility. And needless to say, because of that great utility, it is that consumer durable that has got the largest penetration in this country. In excess of 90% of the households have a phone, and a large percentage of them would be having a smartphone. Compare that to a TV, which is about 60%. Compare that to a washing machine, which is about 40%. And we discussed even an AC is only about 7-8%.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So just the sheer quantum of phones bought.
It's ubiquitous.
It's ubiquitous.
Absolutely.
And the fact that people are buying phones every 3 years, either because it doesn't last beyond that, or for the fact that, there's a better phone available, and therefore I need to get access to that phone, does lead it to be a large quantum of the loans taken, right? And you're right. So that's clear. But the other factor is that, people never used to take loans for consumer durables. People used to take loans for the vehicle.
So there's definitely a switch in behavior there.
There's definitely a switch in behavior there. People used to take loans for a big purchase like a house. And these are all in excess of, 5 to 20 to a couple of crores of loans that you used to take. But then to take a loan for a consumer durable, be it a washing machine, or for that matter, now we're saying largely people take loans for phones for between the ranges of maybe 30,000 to a lakh, right? There's clearly a shift happening in the financial ecosystem, is my understanding, which is to say that, and this goes back to our conversation on gold being where people put all their money and their savings in, and one of the reasons because they don't have access to financial tools, they don't have bank accounts and so on and so forth. Here again, I have a feeling it's a push from the market side, which is to say, listen, there's a large set of people buying phones.
Right.
let me reach out to them and say, now you can buy a phone with a loan, with an EMI process. And this, I'm going to take another couple of minutes. This brings me back to the story of just a year back when I went to buy a set of consumer durables. We were moving houses and we had to, our fridge conked off and we needed to get an AC.
Right.
So I was buying 3-4 things and I went into one of those big retailers. And I went with my mother-in-law, who's great at negotiating. So she negotiated the daylights out of this. Ye bhi le raha hu, I'm taking that also, I'm taking this also. And she got a great discount. And after all that, the guy comes to us and says, you know what? If you take it on a credit card and if you use the EMI option, I'm going to give you 5% more.
Wow.
And that was so counterintuitive to me because when I take stuff on EMI, I'm assuming
I'll have
that
to
I'm
pay
going
more.
to pay more. So I have a feeling one of the reasons is that the financial players are trying to move in and trying to move into the sort of informal economy. And because the informal economy is buying phones, they're trying to get those people on an EMI. So that could be one reason.
And in that very context, Sid, I was talking to you earlier about the Ken publication. I don't know if you ever read that. It's really, really interesting. It's an online publication, talks about business-related articles and a lot about startups and things like that. And they were talking about the context of this smartphone penetration of loans was that a lot of the loans are because the people who are taking the loans are taking them because they are going to use the smartphone for their gig economy usage.
Oh.
So for that guy, it's his means of production.
Okay.
It's the way he's going to actually make money.
Yeah.
And imagine an urban ladder guy or a Uber guy or not. If he don't have a phone, he can't make a living. Right?
Absolutely.
So a lot of those people who are taking the smartphone loans are for that purpose. And it was a very interesting, and I'm just going to go down this rabbit hole for about 30 seconds, is that a lot of the finance companies, Bajaj Finance and such, came up with a way where the smartphone could be locked remotely if they don't pay their EMI.
Got it.
So a few years ago, they actually started these loans and started locking the smartphones when the person didn't pay. Now, the last person who wants their smartphone locked, even you and I could deal with it.
Correct.
But that guy, if he's in the middle of doing a delivery and his smartphone gets locked, he's screwed.
Yeah.
Right? So that's when the RBI jumped in and said, you can't really do this, and they stopped doing it. And now apparently it started again with some safeguards. So they can only lock certain elements of the phone remotely, but not completely shut it down. They were actually making it a brick.
Wow.
At one point. So this became the whole story, and apparently this got pulled back, and now it's back again. Because when the RBI came in and said, no, you can't do it, finance companies obviously turned around and said, well, then we can't do these loans.
Correct.
Because this was our only safeguard of getting the EMIs. So the people who were getting the loans were now getting the loans. So, it was killing a really golden goose in that sense for the guy who's actually getting a loan, buying a phone and being able to make a living.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this entire process is what has allowed for this to become so important, because the smartphone is not just a household good anymore.
It's not.
It does so much more.
Yeah.
And that changed the game completely.
Yeah.
And so much more loans are being taken because of that.
Yeah. So
I found that incredibly fascinating.
That's an interesting point. So we just spoke about phones being utility. And, when you think of phone, you think of voice calls and messages. But this is an economic utility for somebody.
Absolutely.
Somebody who earns 25,000-30,000 rupees a month may not necessarily be able to afford a 15,000-20,000 rupees down payment. And therefore, there are these financial companies who stayed away from unsecured loans, finding a way to capture this purchase, telling that person who needs a utility, say, listen, just pay me 500 or 1,000 a month, which is totally affordable.
Start making a living.
And also somehow securing this loan by saying, listen, if it doesn't happen, it's a fairly secure loan because, I can lock the phone.
I can lock the phone for you, and you'll have to come back to me anyway.
And you'll have to come back to me anyway. So it's a sort of semi-secure loan for the financial company and
It's actually technology very well used in that sense, as long as it works and it's not coercive and all of that. Unfortunately, in India, things tend to go a little awry. But largely speaking, apparently, and just like one reads about these things, that in the pyramid, very often the people at the bottom are the ones who are actually good at returning
Correct.
loans, right? And as a result, the defaults are not very high, is what one learns.
Yeah.
The other thing that I found very interesting was that the sheer friction of taking loans has changed completely. If we go back to 25 years ago, if you wanted to buy an asset, then you wanted a loan, you'd have to go to the bank and paperwork and this, that. And now the loan taking EMIs, like you were just saying, the guy said, here's the EMI, I'll give you even more discount. You go to any e-commerce website, the EMI is, I mean, not even a click away. Forget about that. The EMI option is probably 2 steps higher than the all cash option, right? So it's completely frictionless, very little in terms of paperwork, etc. involved. So that has changed a lot as well, and I think that makes a difference.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember reading a lot of articles about 20 years back when the whole push was to bring the informal economy into the formal economy, open up ATMs, open up branches. There's no longer that conversation now because you're literally when you go buy something in these stores, there is a person there who's willing to offer the loan. So the distribution of that space is no longer through the branch. It's happening through these big retail stores. They're distributing financial instruments, credit cards, loans, and so on and so forth. But you know what? I just don't get it. I've racked my brain. I'm still trying to calculate why that person would give me 5% more discount because I took an EMI. I don't know how to make money.
My head around that one,
and I've done some calculations and I still haven't figured it out. But maybe separate conversation on that one.
The only one I thought of was, change of behavior. They want to encourage the idea of, I mean, those are the things comes, but that's fairly long term. I mean, to be able to spend that money today as an institution, expecting change in behavior a period of time, that's quite an investment.
So there's enough stories from the Western world in the 50s and 60s when the credit cards were coming into places like US. There was a behavior change that happened. That once you got into the credit card ecosystem, you got into this buy now, pay later. And once you've committed to that ecosystem, you tend to be consistent and a little more braver to that ecosystem. You take slightly bigger bets.
Which is intuitive. Understand that.
So therefore, it is potentially an acquisition tool. You've got someone, they're going to buy an iPhone. They're going to buy a smartphone. They're probably into the store. They want to buy a smartphone for 15,000. But there's a better version at 25,000. So the retailer also benefits.
That would be a good reason as well.
So there's an acquisition that the credit card companies get. There's an upgrade value that the retailers get. And that entire ecosystem is fueling that individual to, instead of paying it in full, I'm going to give you a discount if you pay 10,000 rupees. And that acquisition tool potentially could lead to behavior change. And from just buying a phone through the credit card, people might buy their groceries through the upgrading card. And so on and so forth. So there is massive acquisition happening. The credit card penetration in India is still in single figures. So, there's a lot of effort and attempt that's going around that.
And what's interesting is when you were talking about upgrading, is that the way most young consumers in India are looking at it is that I'm not really into ownership. I'm more into upgrading. Right. I'm just moving up and up and up. And so it's really not about what can I own today. It's what can I pay the EMI for today.
Correct.
And that's a very important shift, right? I won't say our time, but a generation above us, if you had the money, you bought the product. Right? Now it's like, if I can afford the EMI for this, then I can afford this product and I can keep paying the EMI. There's a very big shift there. Now that's true with smartphones, that's true with other products. And that's just the way the cookie keeps crumbling.
We are definitely moving from an ownership mindset to more of a rental mindset. That I'm just renting.
So EMIs are rental in that
It's a rental, right? It's a subscription. Amazing. It's a rental. We're moving over to that mindset that we don't want to necessarily own it. I'm going to use it for a year and a half. You know what? And then Apple or Samsung is going to come with the new version, and and there is a resale market for these, so that you can actually sell it. So there is an ownership. There's an ownership to rental mindset that's potentially happening. That brings me to the next point. I don't think people are, lining up the stores when Sony sets up their new technology TV, or when LG comes up with the fancy little fridge. But when
Phones.
Apple or Samsung, or OnePlus announces a new phone, there are people lining up. So it's a lot driven by aspiration. It's a lot driven by conversation of technology and upgrades that entices people to want more, entices people to demand more, and probably end up buying more. So I think there's aspiration at play here for sure.
Yeah, and aspirations so easily delivered because that device is with you all the time, wherever you go. And there is an assumption that it speaks for who you are.
Correct.
Right?
Identity.
It's your identity. And it's completely not separated from you wherever you go. Right? And as a result, you will always be able to flaunt it.
Yeah.
Even if you're not flaunting it, it's reflecting it when you're not flaunting it, right? It's a very clear, more than your clothes, more than your car, more than your house, more than anything else, it's the mobile phone that kind of speaks. And sometimes it's about affluence.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's also about, because of the imagery as you were talking about, it's also about who you are. So if I may have a very expensive Samsung phone, but that speaks very differently from having an iPhone.
Okay.
You know, not just in money terms, but also in terms of who I am.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people see it like that, which is what is then delivered through this kind of a purchase tool available to me. And of course, I mean, what you were talking about earlier, the phone can do so much today. It's a camera, it's an alarm clock, it's a phone, it's a communication device, both words as well as audio, video. It's an entertainment device. Very often people, I'm told people don't have TVs, but they have a phone because the phone is the TV in that sense.
Yeah.
So,
and you know, I carry an iPhone 13. So someone says, and I believe now there's 18. So I'm way behind.
17.
There's 17. So I'm at 13. So I'm still 4 steps
behind.
But I also have a Hotmail account. So that probably explains.
You have to move forward somewhere else before the phone becomes an issue.
But no, interesting. So smartphones, we unpacked a lot. It's utility, it's economic utility, it's a sign of status, it's a ecosystem that's the financial ecosystem that's driving people to come in to the fold. It's an acquisition tool.
And the marketing and financial ecosystem has allowed for it all to become so much easier.
Yeah, you know, the more we have these conversations, the more I realize that there's not really one reason why these things are happening. It's a culmination of market forces and consumer psychology that drives these things. But a very interesting fact in India. So awesome.
So the next time you see one of your friends carrying a phone, you should think about, is it a reflection of what their personality is, who they are? Think about that for yourself as well. And tell us more about other mind-blown facts that you may have. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll pick up one of your facts and talk about that as well.
See you guys soon.